Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wellness of Madness. If you've been here before, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Lore, although many people know me as Withfolklore, where I create content about history, culture, and politics, especially focusing on Mexican and global history. But outside of that work, I am also a nutritionist, and my background is in nutrigenetics, nutrigenomics, and epigenetics, which is basically studying how our biology interacts with our environment and how our bodies respond to the systems we live inside of. This podcast actually started several years ago. Season 1 and Season 2 of the Wellness of Madness podcast were recorded during the pandemic around 2020 and 2021. And during those seasons, the conversation was really centered around mental health. I spoke a lot about my own experiences, my diagnoses, and the way people navigate psychological struggles during intense periods of uncertainty. But something interesting happened. The world changed again, and it became clear that a lot of what we call mental health is actually connected to something much bigger. It's connected to systems, political systems, economic systems, technology, culture, war, food systems, the way societies are structured. So season 3 of the Wellness of Madness is evolving. This season is about what I call systems level madness. We're going to talk about culture, politics, bodies, and power. We're going to talk about how large systems help shape human behavior, human health, and even our biology. Sometimes it will be me talking through these ideas, but other times I will have special guests, people who have experience, expertise, or stories that can deepen this conversation. But the central question of this season is simple. What do the systems we live in actually do to the human organism? And today's episode is a perfect place to start because right now, a lot of people around the world feel something very, very similar. We feel tense. People feel tense. People feel overwhelmed. People feel like the world is becoming more hostile. And the question is, why? When we talk about war, instability, and political conflict, we usually talk about it in very large terms. We talk about borders. We talk about governments. We talk about armies and power. But there's another level to all of this that people don't talk about as much. War and instability don't just change countries. They change people. They change the way people think. They change the way people behave. And they even change the way our bodies function. Right now, we live in a world where information travels instantly. We wake up in the morning and within minutes, we can see news about conflicts on the other side of the planet. You see images, you see commentary, you see fear, anger, propaganda, arguments, and your brain is trying to process all of that. But the truth is that the human nervous system did not evolve for this level of exposure. For most of human history, our ancestors lived in small communities. Information traveled slowly. Danger was very local. If something happened in another region of the world, people might not hear about it for months or ever. But today we live in a state of constant global awareness, and that constant exposure changes the way our bodies operate. When the human body perceives danger, it activates the fight or flight response. This is controlled by the nervous system. So hormones like cortisol and adrenaline rise. Your body prepares to respond. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tighten. Your focus narrows. This response is incredibly useful if you're facing immediate danger. But it was never meant to be activated all the time. And yet many people today live in a state of chronic activation of high cortisol, constant news cycles, economic pressure, political polarization, social media outrage. All of these things send signals to the brain that something is wrong. And when the nervous system remains activated for long periods of time, it changes how people behave. People become more reactive, more defensive, more aggressive, and not necessarily because they are bad people, but because their bodies are operating in survival mode. There's a line I like to constantly repeat because it captures this perfectly. A dysregulated nervous system cannot produce a regulated society. If millions of people are operating under chronic stress, it becomes very difficult for communities to think clearly, to collaborate, and to solve problems. Now, this is where things get even spicier because stress doesn't just affect the moment we're in, it can also affect longer biological timelines. In fields like epigenetics, researchers study how environmental stressors influence gene expression. That means that the conditions people live through, war, famine, displacement, extreme instability, can influence how certain biological systems behave. It doesn't change your DNA, but it does change your gene expression. So stress responses, inflammation patterns, metabolic responses. In other words, history doesn't just live in our books. History lives in our bodies. You can see this in communities that have experienced major upheaval, war, colonization, forced migration. Those experiences don't just disappear when the political event ends. They leave traces in culture, behavior, and sometimes in biology. And that's one of the reasons why understanding systems level stress matters. Because if we want healthier societies, we can't just look at politics. We also have to look at the human organisms experiencing those systems. So let's talk about food systems, because another powerful way systems reach into the human body is through food. Wars, colonization, and industrialization didn't just change borders, they changed food systems. Entire populations shifted away from traditional diets. Local agriculture was replaced with industrial food production, and over time, that reshaped metabolic health across the world. This is actually one of the main ideas behind the book I'm working on called Decolonize Your Diet. The book explores how colonial systems reshaped traditional food cultures and how reconnecting with ancestral nutrition can play a huge role in restoring health. Because food is one of the most direct ways the external world enters the human body. It enters it every day, several times a day. So when people talk about systems affecting biology, food is one of the clearest examples. Now, this is really important. Understanding these biological effects does not mean we ignore what's happening in the world. It doesn't mean we disconnect from reality. It doesn't mean we pretend everything is fine, because it's not. What it means is that we have to develop resilience. Because if we want to lead in our communities, if we want to organize, if we want to think clearly, if we want to help other people, we cannot do that from a place of complete nervous system exhaustion. We have to protect our biology. Sometimes that means stepping away from the noise just for a moment, to maybe take a deep breath, to drink some water, to eat some real food, and most importantly, to get some sunlight, to touch earth. Letting your nervous system come back to a state where it can actually process information. When you return to the world, you will feel stronger, more grounded, and more capable of responding rather than just reacting. Because if we don't take care of our bodies during unstable times, we lose the very thing we need the most: clarity. This is what season 3 of The Wellness of Madness is all about. Understanding how large systems, politics, culture, technology, economics shape the human organism. Our bodies, our nervous systems, our communities. Some episodes will be conversations just like this. Other episodes will include guests who can help us explore these ideas more deeply. But the goal of this podcast is simple: to help people understand the connection between systems and biology so that we can navigate the world with more awareness, more resilience, and hopefully more wisdom. So thank you for being here, and welcome to season 3 of The Wellness of Madness. I'm your host, Lore.